Welcome to the World War America podcast. I'm Anderson Thomas. Thanks for joining me again. So, how do you break down the news, right? How do you break it down? How do you grab the news and look at it and say, okay, what's going on today? What's going to be happening over the next month, 6 months? What's going on? It's important that you have a method. Now, I'll share with you my method of breaking down the news, and it's one that's helped me for a long time. The main point of this, though, is to get you in a position where you're not allowing the news to direct how you feel every day. You have to put yourself in a position where you're in control, and you're in a position where you're wielding the news to your benefit, rather than the news wielding the events of the day onto your head and forcing you to adjust. So why is this important? It's important because unless you can get control of the information you're exposed to, you're going to be lost. You're going to be lost, and disinformation is going to sweep you away. Misinformation, you're going to be swept away in the wash. You're going to be just another, herd animal out there running off the cliff, following all the other herd animals. Don't do it, okay? If you want to be in a good place and you want freedom, you want access to everything, but at the same time, you don't want to go crazy with the insanity that's out there, you got to break it down. So, how do you break it down? This is how I do it. First of all, you have to have an eye out for news items that will have legs going out for several weeks or months. In other words, you're looking for news that isn't just a one-off about an incident that happened in the past and will never happen again. You want to look for things, you want to pay attention to things that are going to be around a long time. So it's the first thing you do when you're going through the news. You want to look at whatever site you go to, whatever newspaper you're reading, whatever television station you're watching. You really want to pay attention to the things that will last a long time, the topics that will be around for a while, okay? The second thing you want to do is you want to pay attention to the dollar amounts in any piece of work you're looking at, any news coverage. You want to look at the dollar amounts. Small dollar amounts are a problem, okay, for what we need to do. Small dollar amounts means that it's not important. I hate to say it, but that's just the reality. For what we do, what you want to do, for staying in control of the news and wielding it to your benefit, you want to pay attention to the things with big dollar amounts attached to them. Okay. The other thing you want to look for is coverage, stories, topics that are getting coverage across many, many platforms all at the same time over several days. So if you see a topic that's been going for days and it's on several platforms, that's another thing that you need to pay attention to, okay? Now, if this is a politician that's been trending or someone who's been covered by many, many platforms for many, many days, then you want to go through the World War America checklist that I gave earlier on. You want to pay attention to the politicians who are longtime incumbents, politicians who do not need to campaign and have multiple political organizations that they bring money into, okay? Those are the guys you want to pay attention to. So once you have these four things set up, where you've got stories that are going to last a long time, stories that there's a lot of money involved, stories that are being covered across many platforms for several days, and if the politicians are involved, politicians that are longtime incumbents that never have to really campaign to get reelected because they're so popular or whatever in their districts, and they have multiple political organizations that they're bringing money into. If you are paying attention to those four things and you got those going, then you're now in a position where you know what's important to pay attention to and what isn't. So just to give an example, I went through today's news breakdown. That I always do a breakdown. I went through mine today with the idea that I'll use it whatever the results are, I'll use it for a podcast entry. And so luckily for me, today was a good day. Now, I picked a Monday because Monday is usually a day where stories that would have come out on Friday, they kick to Monday because Friday release stories never really get much playtime, never carry through. So Monday is a good day. That's when a lot of stories over the weekend came together for people and stuff like that. So Monday is a pretty good day. So in looking at it, I'll tell you what I found, right? I looked at MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, Breitbart, CBS News, NBC News. And the reason why I looked at these guys, and it was random, is because the first thing you want to do is you want to look at the main headlines, the front page, the main topic page for any news site you go to. All right? That's the first thing you want to do. So you don't want to dig in too deep on any one subject. What you want to do is look at what they're all talking about, what MSNBC is talking about, CNN, Fox News. So I did that. And what I noticed was everyone, CNN, Fox News, Breitbart, CBS News, NBC News, they all had way up top trending or whatever on their sites, different variations on the migrants that Governor Ron DeSantis from Florida, the migrants that were sent to Martha's Vineyard last week by plane, right? That came up with everybody. It's Monday, and they're still talking about it, right? But that's everybody, including Breitbart, okay? Breitbart actually had a ton of immigration stuff up there and migrant stuff. So here's what was interesting, though. So I saw that, and I said, I dug in a little bit, and I noticed there was some money. But when you're looking at the DeSantis side of this, with the sending out of migrants via plane, that's a $12 million fund that he has access to in the state of Florida. That isn't much money. So I just thought, even if I dug up some stuff on some airlines that he's using or something, or if you guys were to dig, there's $12 million at hand here. And that's just not a lot of money. That's not something that is worth digging into, not at this point. Now, if he gets a bigger pot of money, it becomes $100 million for transporting migrants. That I would take a look then. But at $12 million, nah, not so much, okay? So you got that. So there's nowhere to go on that. So why is everyone covering this, and what angles are they taking is what you want to look at. So CNN, it was covering it as the relocation of migrants by Republican governors recalls painful memories of the reverse freedom rides. And that's basically an article that talks about how in the 1960s, there was a racist organization in the South that was sending black people out of the South up to northern states to get rid of them, right? And what they're saying in CNN is that they spoke to a few people who had family members who had been shipped and stuff like that, and they were describing, hey, that's what this is like, what DeSantis is doing. That's CNN. Fox News said migrants DeSantis sent to Martha's Vineyard were homeless, hungry before flight to island, according to Florida officials. And they gave a quote, "These are just the beginning of the efforts," the Republican governor said. "We've got an infrastructure in place now. There's going to be a lot more that's happening." So that's from DeSantis, and Fox News is saying, hey man, these migrants were homeless along the border, and DeSantis helped them out by sending them to, according to DeSantis people, a sanctuary state, right? Breitbart's coverage was China on Martha's Vineyard. Democrats are hostile and fearful towards migrants. That's the title, that's the headline for Breitbart. But when you read the article, it says, and this is a quote from the Global Times, which is a Chinese government mouthpiece, "Despite earning a reputation of being open and tolerant to migrants, the Democrats, through this political stunt, only prove themselves no less hostile and fearful towards migrants than their Republican counterparts." So, yeah, they did attack the Democrats, but if you look deep into that article, the Chinese government is using this situation to knock down both the Republicans and the Democrats. And in there, they also go on to say that this whole spectacle showed that American politicians in both parties view migrants only as a tool to attack opponents and achieve political ends. So that's how the Chinese government is playing this. So if you consider that, by the way, that's a big deal. When another country's government is stepping in and they're getting involved in a topic, that's telling you this topic isn't going anywhere. All right. More. CBS News. The facts behind the Republican effort to send migrants to Democratic-led cities. That's a whole piece, and they give you all the facts. They kind of like fact check it. NBC News with the title, Migrants who landed in Martha's Vineyard were tricked by misleading brochure, lawyers say. All right. So that's what you got from all of them. Here's what's interesting, and this is why you have to go through all of the headlines or all of the big stories and multiple news sites and platforms. Because MSNBC, they have a section where they give you like the top 15 stories of the day. And none of those stories had anything to do with DeSantis or Martha's Vineyard, which I kind of chuckled a little bit saying, well, these guys are the most partisan of them all. Like you would think they'd be jumping all over this. And I thought, this is strange that MSNBC hasn't jumped on it, right? And MSNBC was talking about the GOP and their plan to go scorched earth if they get the House back. And they're going to do investigations into Hunter Biden, Merrick Garland, Joe Biden, blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. And the other sites were commenting about this a little bit too. But at the end of the day, MSNBC had nothing about the migrant situation and Governor DeSantis sending migrants to Martha's Vineyard. And so when you see something like that, you have to dig in deeper. Now, why do I say that? Because what we're trying to do here is we're trying to look out on the horizon on the news cycle. We're trying to get a grasp of it, and we're trying to grab the topics that are going to be topics that are going to be talked about on and on and on, probably for the next 6 months to a year, maybe 2 years. And when we're on those topics, what we want to do is we want to examine how people in the media space are portraying the topics. That gives you a better insight into what's really going on. And as I read to you the different ones, you can see Fox News focused in on how the migrants were homeless and hungry, and Breitbart focused in on how the Chinese government said that the Democrats are hostile and fearful towards migrants. Right? And then you look at CNN, and they're saying that that this whole thing is just like reverse freedom rides. It's racist. Okay? And CBS News is fact checking, and NBC News is saying that the migrants were tricked by a brochure. So DeSantis tricked them, according to NBC. So as you can see the coverage, you can see who's leaning where on this topic. This topic is going to be very important. Like I said, the Chinese government's on top of it. Okay, so they know that this thing's going to be going around, and they're positioning themselves to be a winner no matter how this turns out. So back to MSNBC. Why are they not covering that story today? So I took a look. When that comes up, the first thing you have to do is you have to start looking at, well, who makes the news at MSNBC, right? And, these are the people that I call thought police. They got some thought police people up in there, okay? They also have some thought alchemists in there, people who are able to put together piece by piece big thoughts that news agencies and the reporters and journalists within those agencies do their work within the confines of to promote. Okay, so who's the person over at MSNBC that should be looked at, right, is the question. And so when you look at MSNBC, you say, wait a minute, they just had to hire someone and someone just got promoted. Wait a minute, here we go. Rashida Jones. who is the president of MSNBC. She just got promoted a year ago to that position. And what's interesting about that is she was the one over there before she got this position that was pretty much the head of content for years at MSNBC. So here's the person who's the head of content. She's now the president of MSNBC. Different job, okay? And what do you notice? Well, a big news item that all the other news agencies, including the ones on the right, are covering, including the Chinese government is covering, right? What you have is you have this major news. They're not even covering it on their main page. Okay, so there's some type of slip here when it comes to their content. And what's interesting about that is that Rashida Jones just announced that MSNBC hired a CNN veteran named Rebecca Cutler. Rebecca Cutler was named to be the Senior Vice President of Content Strategy. Okay? She doesn't start, though, until September 26th. So until then, MSNBC is riding out. It appears to be without a content person in place in charge of everything. And this kind of shows it, where everyone else is covering a story and they aren't. Especially when the Chinese government is covering it. So what does this say? What this says is, first of all, we have an idea of what Rebecca Cutler is probably going to be doing over at MSNBC. So if the content starts to change a little bit after September 26th, look, we know who did it, right? We know who's a part of that, right? Rebecca will be reporting directly to Rashida Jones, according to the MSNBC press release. All right. So that's what we got there. Number one is got to look at MSNBC for the content after September 26th, because that will tell you more about where they're going on the news. And that's important because you need to know where these news agencies are going, and you need to know who it is in charge that is directing them in the direction they're going into. The reason why you need to know all of this is because this is what allows you to know when there's bias in a story, when a news agency is kind of on thin ice on a topic, when maybe you shouldn't trust them too much on a topic. Well, you don't just have a gut feeling or emotion. I don't like CNN. No. You actually have to know who's doing what over there. At least the big people that are in charge. And you have to understand what their roles are a little bit and what kind of content they're putting out. This allows you basically to predict the future almost anything. Seriously, it does. Because you can look at some of these individuals and how they handle certain stories, and you'll know how they'll handle the same story 6 months later, because they're going to do it the same, right? Very important. So, just to recap, okay? It's very important to go in and look at all of the news coverage. The main topics, the top 10 stories for each news site, all of them, right wing, left wing. You want to go on to see what's trending on Twitter. You want to go see what's trending with Facebook. You want to check it all out, and you want to look at it overall to see which topics are the ones of interest for what we do and for what you want to do. And like I said earlier, those topics of interest are going to be the ones that are going to have a lot of money. They're going to be topics that are being covered across multiple platforms for several days. And if there's politicians involved, it's somebody who's been around for a long time that doesn't have to campaign much and has multiple political organizations bringing in cash, right? These are the things you want to look at the most. And you want to pay attention to them because these are the stories that are going to matter 6 months and a year from now, okay? That's how you find them. So with that said, immigration, obviously now, I'm showing you, immigration is a huge story. It's made it to China. China's on top of it, and they're using it for their political purposes. So Now we have a topic here that we're going to probably talk about a lot going forward, and we'll talk about how the ins and outs and how it's morphing and changing, and how different news agencies are changing strategies when they're covering it, right? All of this we'll do. But now you have a good idea of how to tackle the news in a way where you have like a little bit of a system. This took me 30 minutes. Okay, it usually takes me about 30 minutes to break down the news every day. So it took me 30 minutes. I could have gone further and further. I didn't, but 30 minutes. This is what we have to start doing as citizens, as free people. We have to start becoming more sophisticated, and we have to spend the time breaking this stuff down, looking at what's going on, controlling our information environment, I like to say. So once again, thanks again for joining me. World War America podcast. Talk again to you very, very soon. Good night.